Will rising tensions lead Israel and Iran into war? Tensions between Israel and Iran have increased since President Donald Trump unilaterally pulled the United States out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the 2015 accord to win back Iran's nuclear program in return for sanctions relief in 2018. Israel and Iran have been antagonists since 1980s, but after the U.S. 2003 invasion of Iraq, the formal withdrawal of American troops in 2011, the regional balance of power was broken, leaving the Middle East without a clear authority that created a vacuum that has brought the countries into increasing conflict. The Iran-Iraq War began on 22 September 1980 when Iraq invaded Iran, and it ended on 20th of August 1988 when Iran accepted the UN brokered ceasefire. Iraq wanted to replace Iran as the dominant Persian Gulf state and was worried that 1979 Iranian Revolution would lead Iraqi Shi'ite majority rebel against the Ba'athist government. The war also followed a long history of border disputes, and Iraq planned to annex the oil-rich Khuzestan Province and the east bank of the Shatt. After 8 years of the war exhaustion, economic devastation, decreased morale, military settlement, lack of international sympathy against the use of the weapons of mass destruction against civilians by Iraqi forces, and the increased U.S.-Iran military tensions all led to a ceasefire brokered by the United Nations. The conflict has been compared to World War I in terms of the tactics used, including large-scale trench warfare with barbed wire stretched across fortified defense lines, manned machine gun posts, bayonet charges, Iranian human wave attacks, extensive use of chemical weapons by Iraq, and later deliberate attacks on the civilian targets. A special feature of the war can be seen in the Iranian cult of the majority martyr, which had been developed in the years before revolution. The discourses on martyrdom formulated in the Iranian Shi'ite context led to the tactics of human wave attacks and thus had a lasting impact on the dynamics of the war. An estimated 500,000 Iraqi and Iranian soldiers died, in addition to a smaller number of civilians. The end of the war resulted in neither reparation nor border changes. For latest current affair news, subscribe News 786, like and share. American support for Ba'athist Iraq during the Iran-Iraq War, in which it fought against post-revolutionary Iran, included several $billion worth of economic aid, the sale of the dual-use technology, non-U.S. origin weaponry, military intelligence, and special operating training. However, the U.S. did not directly supply arms to Iraq. U.S. government support for Iraq was not a secret and was frequently discussed in open session of the Senate and the House of Representatives. American views towards Iraq were not enthusiastically supportive in its conflict with Iran, and activity in its assistance was largely to prevent an Iranian victory. A key element of the U.S. political, military, and energy economic planning occurred in early 1983. The Iran-Iraq War had been going on for 3 years, and there were significant casualties on both sides, reaching hundreds of thousands. A National Security Planning Group meeting was called, chaired by Vice President George W. Bush, to review U.S. options. It was determined that there have a high likelihood that the conflict would spread into Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states, but that the United States had little capability to defend the region. Furthermore, it was determined that a prolonged war in the region would induce much higher oil prices and threaten the fragile world recovery, which was just beginning to gain momentum. On 22nd of May 1984, President Reagan was briefed on the project conclusion on the Oval Office by William Flynn Martin, who had served as the head of the NSC staff that organized the study. U.S. attention was focused on isolating Iran as well as maintaining freedom of navigation. It criticized Iran mining of international waters and sponsored UN Security Council Resolution 598, which passed unanimously on 20th of July, under which the U.S. and Iranian forces skirmished during Operation Earnest Will. During the Operation Nimble Archer in October 1987, the United States attacked the Iranian oil platforms in retaliation for an Iranian attack on the U.S.-flagged Kuwait tanker. The relationships between those two nations have warmed immensely since the downfall of Saddam Hussein, but mostly out of their pragmatic interest. Iran and Iraq share many common interests, as they share a common enemy in the Islamic State. significant military assistance has been provided by Iran to Iraq, and this has bought them a large amount of political influence in Iraq's newly elected Shi'ite government. The Iran-Iraq war is regarded as being a major trigger for rising sectarianism in the region, as it was viewed by many as a clash between Sunni Muslim, Iraq and other Arab states, and the Shiite revolutionaries that had recently taken power in Iran. There remains lingering animosity, however, despite the pragmatic alliance that have been formed, as a multiple government declaration from Iran have stated that the war will affect every issue of the internal and foreign policy for decades to come. The sustained importance of this conflict is attributed mostly to the massive human and economic cost resulting from it, along with its ties to the Iranian Revolution. Another significant effect that the war has on Iran's policy is the issue of remaining war reparations. The UN estimates that Iraq owes about $149 billion, while Iran contends that, with both the direct and indirect effects taken into account, the cost of the war reaches $1 trillion. Iran has not vocalized the desire for these reparations in recent years and has even suggested forms of financial aid. This is due most likely to Iran's interest in keeping Iraq politically stable, and imposing these reparation costs would further burden the already impoverished nation. The most important factor that governs Iraq's current foreign policy is the national government's consistent fragility following the overthrow of the Saddam Hussein. Iraq's need for any and all allies that can help bring stability and bring development has allowed Iran to exert significant influence over the new Iraqi state, despite lingering memories of the war. Iraq is far too weak of a state to attempt to challenge Iran regionally, so accepting support while focusing on counter-insurgency and stabilization is their best interest. Another significant factor influencing relations is the shared cultural interest of their respective citizens, as they both wish to freely visit the multitude of holy sites located in both countries. Despite their aggressive rhetoric, officials in neither country seek an all-out direct war, but differences in perception, deteriorating commitment to the vestiges of the JCPOA, and the vagaries of elections in Israel, Iran, and the US all ratchet up their prospect that an inadvertent clash would escalate the conflict.